Mama, you no wear anything. Take this scarf, abeg. It's too cold to stay like this. This one dey warm well. My mama gave it to me, but you need it more now, Mama. It go help you rest more.
Thank you, my pikin.
No! Leave me alone! What you're about to hear might change your life forever. I go leave it for Tales by Chika to tell the rest. I was only trying to help this woman, just like my mama teach me. You too go do the same thing. But what happened after? Subscribe now to Tales by Chika, like and share before we continue.
This one passed me by people, but the evening shadows were growing longer as Sarah turned the heavy iron key in the lock of her tailor shop. She had worked late again, finishing Mrs. Adebayo's wedding wrapper that was due tomorrow. Her fingers were sore from the intricate beading, but she smiled knowing how beautiful the bride would look. As Sarah adjusted her favorite blue scarf around her neck, the soft warm wool that her grandmother had given her years ago, she turned to head home, but something caught her eyes that made her heart skip a beat. Not far from her shop, hunched against the old brick wall, sat the most pitiful sight Sarah had ever seen. An ancient woman, perhaps 97 years old, wearing nothing but a strapless torn red dress that barely covered her frail body. Her chest bones were clearly visible through the threadbare fabric, jutting out like the ribs of a broken umbrella. Her grey hair hung in matted strands around a face so withered it looked like dried leather left in the sun for decades. Sarah noticed how other people walking by would glance at the woman, then quickly look away and cross to the other side of the street. Some even covered their children's eye as they hurried past her. But what struck Sarah most was how the old woman's dark, sunken eyes seemed to follow every person who ignored her, as if she was memorizing their face. The old woman was shivering in the evening breeze, her bony hands wrapped around her knees, trying to preserve what little warmth she had. A small cracked bowl sat beside her, with only a few coins scattered at the bottom. Sarah's grandmother had always taught her that helping those in need was the highest calling of a human heart. When you see suffering and walk away, her grandmother used to say, you leave a piece of your soul on that street corner. Despite all, something deep inside her, whispering warning. Sarah's compassionate heart won the battle with her cautious mind. She walked slowly towards the old woman, her footsteps echoing off the damp pavement. Good evening, mother, Sarah said gently, using the respectful term for an elderly woman. The old woman's head snapped up with a surprising speed, and her eyes looked onto Sarah with an intensity that made Sarah's breath cut in her throat. Those eyes were not the grateful, humble eyes of most beggars. They were calculating, ancient, and seemed to hold secrets that no mortal should know. Without hesitation, Sarah began unwrapping her precious blue scarf from around her neck. The wool was warm from her body heat, and it smelled faintly of the lavender soap she used to wash her clothes. It was the only warm thing she had with her, but the old woman's need seemed greater than her own comfort. Here, mother, Sarah said, kneeling down to gently wrap the scarf around the old woman's bare shoulders. This will help you warm tonight. The moment the scarf touched the old woman's skin, Sarah felt a strange electric sensation run through her fingers, as if she had touched a live wire. The old woman's eyes rolled back for a moment, showing only the whites, and she let out a soft sigh that sounded like air escaping from a tomb. Then the old woman's eyes focused on Sarah again, and her cracked lips smiled. Oh, the woman whispered in a voice like autumn leaves. You've helped me more than you know. You've helped me in ways that will echo through your life, like thunder through the mountains. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine at these words, but she attributed it to the evening cold. Now that she no longer had her scarf, she reached into her small purse and pulled out her last 500 naira, all the money she had left, until her next customer paid her. Please, take this too, Sarah said, dropping the money into the old woman's bowl. Buy yourself some food and find somewhere warm to sleep. The old woman picked up the money. She held it close to her face and inhaled deeply, as if she could smell something on the bills that Sarah couldn't detect. "Generous child," the old woman whispered, her voice now carrying an odd melody that seemed to echo strangely in the narrow street. "Your kindness has opened a door that can never be closed again. The thread between us is woven now, stronger than any fabric you could sew." Sarah felt increasingly uncomfortable with the woman's strange words, but she forced herself to smile. "God bless you, mother. Stay safe." As Sarah turned to leave, the old woman called out one more time. "Wait, child." Sarah turned back, and the old woman was holding up the blue scarf, examining it in the fading light as if she could read its history in the weave. "This scarf, your grandmother's love is woven into every thread. How beautiful and how foolish of you to give it away." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. She had never told the old woman that the scarf was from her grandmother. How could she possibly know that? But before she could ask, the old woman wrapped the scarf around herself and closed her eyes as if she had fallen asleep instantly. That strange moment passed, and Sarah convinced herself that it must have been a lucky guess. Many young women receive scarves from their grandmother after all. Sarah walked home feeling both happy that she had helped someone in need and strangely empty without her beloved scarf around her neck. The evening air felt colder than usual. That night, as Sarah prepared for bed, she noticed something odd. Usually, she could hear the normal sound of her neighborhood: dogs barking, children playing, radios playing. But tonight, everything was quiet, as if a heavy blanket had been thrown over the entire area. She also noticed that her usual reliable dog, Bingo, who slept outside her house, was nowhere to be found. Bingo never wandered far from home, especially at night. Sarah called for him several times, but heard no response. As she finally drifted off to bed, Sarah had the strangest sensation that someone was watching her house. From the street outside, every time she got up to look out the window, she saw nothing but empty darkness. But the feeling of being observed never left her, even in her dreams. Sarah woke up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat. Her heart was pounding. As she sat up in bed, trying to shake off the remnants of the nightmare, Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. There, clearly visible in the moonlight streaming through her window, were small wet footprints leading from her bedroom door to the side of her bed. The footprints were tiny, like those of a very old person with bound feet, and they were still damp, as if someone had just walked through her house moments ago. But Sarah lived alone, and she clearly remembered locking her door before going to bed. With trembling hands, Sarah lit her bedside candle and followed the trail of footprints. They led from her bedroom down the short hallway to her front door, which was still securely locked from the inside. But the footprints continued past the door, as if whoever had made them had simply walked through the solid wood. Most disturbing of all, the footprints smelled like the old woman from the street, a mixture of decay, old fabric, and something else that Sarah couldn't identify, but made her stomach turn. Sarah spent the rest of the night sitting in her chair with the candle burning, afraid to go back to bed. Every small sound made her jump, and she could swear she heard someone humming that same haunting lullaby from her dream, though the sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. When morning finally came, Sarah felt exhausted and shaky. She had barely managed to doze off when the sun rose, and now she had to open her shop and pretend that everything was normal. But as Sarah approached her tailor shop, she discovered that nothing would ever be normal again. The front door was standing wide open. Sarah was certain she had locked it securely the night before. She had checked it twice, as she always did. Inside, the scene was devastating. All of her beautiful fabrics were scattered across the floor like colorful snow. Bolts of silk, cotton, and lace that she spent months collecting and organizing were unrolled and tangled together in impossible knots. Her measuring tapes had been cut into pieces, 1-inch piece, and arranged in strange patterns in her cutting table. But the most heartbreaking discovery was that her grandmother's antique sewing machine, the one piece of equipment that meant more to her than all the rest combined together, was missing. It had been a wedding gift to her grandmother 60 years ago, and Sarah had learned to sew on that very machine as a child. Sarah sank to her knees among the ruined fabrics and began to cry. Not only had someone destroyed her livelihood, but they had stolen the one thing that connected her to her beloved grandmother's memory. As she sat there weeping, Mrs. Okafor, her neighbor who owned the grocery shop next door, came running over. "Sarah, what happened here? I heard such strange noises last night, like someone was moving furniture around, but also singing. When I looked out my window, I thought I saw lights dancing in your shop, but not electric lights. They were green and cold looking." "You saw lights in my shop last night?" Sarah asked, wiping her tears. "Yes, and the singing, it went on for hours. I almost came to check on you." But Mrs. Okafor paused, looking embarrassed. "I'm sorry, Sarah, but something told me not to. I had this terrible feeling that if I open my door, something bad will happen to my family." Sarah felt a chill of recognition. The same instinct that had told Mrs. Okafor to stay inside was the same whisper she had ignored when she decided to help the old woman. That afternoon, Sarah's first customer arrived, Mr. Debayo, coming to collect his wife's wedding wrapper. But when Sarah brought out the garment, both she and Mr. Debayo gasped in horror. The beautiful gold and blue wrapper, which had been perfect when Sarah finished it the day before, now looked like it had aged 50 years overnight. The color had faded to silky yellow and grey. The intricate beadwork had unraveled into tangles. "What did you do to my wife's dress?" Mr. Debayo demanded, his voice rising in anger. I don't understand," Sarah stammered. "It was perfect yesterday. Someone broke into my shop last night, but I thought they only took my sewing machine. This is unacceptable. My wife's wedding is tomorrow, and now she has nothing to wear. I want my money back, and I'm going to tell everyone in the village what kind of work you do." Mr. Debayo stormed out, leaving Sarah alone with the ruined wrapper. As she examined it more closely, she noticed something that made her hand shake. Sewn into the fabric in tiny, almost invisible stitches were words in a language she didn't recognize, but somehow she could understand their meaning. What was freely given would be dearly paid. Over the next few days, Sarah's life continued to unravel. Like a poorly sewn seam, every piece of clothing she had made in the past month began to deteriorate in impossible ways. Colors faded overnight, seams split for no reason, and fabrics developed stains that wouldn't wash out no matter what she tried. Her customers came to her shop one by one, demanding refunds and hurling insults and accusations on her. Mrs. Elumere claimed that the blouse Sarah had made for her caused her to break out in painful boils. Young Miss Aduni said that the skirt Sarah had sewn made her trip and fall 3 times in one day. But the most heartbreaking complaint came from Mrs. Babatunde, who had asked Sarah to make a small wrapper for her newborn grandson. The baby had worn the wrapper for just one night before developing a fever that no medicine could break. The child cried inconsolably whenever the wrapper touched his skin, but fell silent and peaceful the moment it was removed. "There is something evil in your sewing now, Sarah," Mrs. Babatunde said, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know what you've done, but you need to fix it before you hurt more innocent children." Sarah tried to explain about the break-in, about how someone had sabotaged her work, but her explanation sounded weak, even to her own ears. How could she tell people that she suspected her troubles began when she helped an old beggar woman? They would think she had lost her mind. That night, Sarah had a strange dream. In her dream, she saw that the old woman was sewing a garment from thread that looked suspiciously like memories. With each stitch, Sarah felt herself forgetting something precious. Her grandmother's laugh, her fake successful dress, the pride she felt when customers complimented her work. "Stop!" Sarah tried to shout, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. "Those are my memories. Give them back to me." The old woman finally looked up, and Sarah saw that her eyes were no longer the dull, lifeless eyes of a beggar. They sparkled with intelligence and malice, and when she smiled, her teeth were perfectly white and sharp. "You gave me permission when you touched me, child. Everything you are, everything you ever been, now belongs to me. I'm simply collecting what's rightfully mine." Sarah woke up screaming, her throat raw as if she had actually been shouting in her sleep. But the most terrifying part was that she couldn't remember her grandmother's maiden name, something she had known all her life until that moment. The next morning, Sarah made a desperate decision. She would seek help from Prophet Miriam, a powerful spiritual woman who lived on the outskirts of the village. If anyone could understand what was happening to her, it would be someone who dealt with matters beyond the physical world. Prophet Miriam lived in a small compound surrounded by herbs and strange symbols carved into wooden posts. The moment Sarah walked through the gate, the prophet looked up from the cowrie shell. "You carry something that doesn't belong to you," Prophet Miriam said. "Something has attached itself to your spirit. Tell me what happened." Sarah told her everything. She had helped an old woman, given away her scarf, and then her life started falling apart. There were break-ins, ruined clothes, and terrible dreams. Prophet Miriam listened carefully. When Sarah finished, the prophet closed her eyes and prayed in an ancient language. Then she opened her eyes and looked sad. "You have been marked by an old curse," she said. "The woman you helped carries punishment for a terrible betrayal. Long ago, she was a midwife who let greed overcome her duty. A royal family and a child died because of her." "But how is that my business? I was just being kind," Sarah protested. "I know, child, but the curse is clever. It cannot pass to someone unwillingly. It needs an act of genuine charity. To create the bridge, your kindness gave her permission to transfer her burden to you." Prophet Miriam gathered special oils, herbs, and carved bones. "There is a way to break this connection, but it's dangerous. You must return to where you first met her and perform a ritual, but the curse will fight you. It will try to convince you that you deserve the punishment." Sarah returned to the street corner where she had met the old woman days ago with the ritual items. It was late afternoon, just like when she first met the old woman. She knelt down and began arranging the items in a circle. "I'm going to break this connection," she said to the empty air. "I was kind to you, but you repaid my kindness with suffering." People passing by stopped to stare. They saw a young woman kneeling on the ground, talking to herself. They whispered about whether someone should call for help. An elderly man named Mr. Ogundumi approached her. "Young lady, are you all right? You've been talking to yourself." Sarah looked up with tears in her eyes. "Can't you see her? The old woman who sits here?" Mr. Ogundumi's face grew serious. "There is no one here but us, young lady. But tell me about this old woman." Sarah described the woman in the red dress. Mr. Ogundumi sat down heavily on a bench. "Child, every 5 years someone comes to me with the same story. They helped an old woman in a red dress. Then their lives fall apart. Some people moved away, others went mad. A few disappeared completely." "What happened to the others?" Sarah asked. "One woman broke free about 15 years ago. She burned something here one night. The next morning, she left the village, but she wrote to her sister saying she found peace. Her letter mentioned returning what was freely given with the fire of truth." As evening approached, Sarah prepared to perform the ritual that Prophet Miriam had taught her. But first, she needed to retrieve the one item that would make the ritual complete: her blue scarf. Sarah had given up hope of ever seeing her beloved scarf again when a young boy, perhaps 8 years old, appeared at her shop the next morning. Didn't recognize him, and he seemed nervous, constantly looking over his shoulder as if someone might be following him. "Auntie Sarah," the boy said in a small voice, "someone told me to give this to you." He held out a carefully folded bundle of blue fabric, her grandmother's scarf, looking exactly as it had the day she gave it away. It was clean and soft, with no sign of wear or damage, as if it had been lovingly cared for during its absence. "Who gave this to you?" Sarah asked, reaching for the scarf with trembling hands. "An old woman in the market. She said you needed it back for something important. She said to tell you that the circle must be completed." Before Sarah could ask any more questions, the boy turned and ran away. disappearing into the crowded market street. Sarah was left holding her scarf, feeling both relieved to have it back and terrified of what it might mean. The scarf felt different somehow, heavier than she remembered, and warm to the touch despite the cool morning. As Sarah lifted it to examine it more closely, she caught a faint scent that made her stomach turn. It smelled like the old woman, that mixture of decay and ancient fabric that had haunted her dreams. Despite her reservations, Sarah wrapped the scarf around her neck, desperate to feel the comfort and security it had always provided. The moment the wool touched her skin, she felt a sharp burning pain shoot through her left eye. The pain was so intense that Sarah doubled over, pressing her hands to her eye and crying out. When she looked at her hand, she saw blood on her fingers. She stumbled to the small mirror she kept in her shop and gasped at her reflection. Her left eye had turned completely white, like a marble or a pearl. She could see nothing but bright colorless light through that eye, and every blink sent waves of pain through her head. But the blindness wasn't the worst part. As Sarah watched her reflection in horror, she saw her skin beginning to change. It was becoming pale and dry, like parchment, and fine lines were appearing around her mouth and eyes, aging her years in mere moments. The scarf seemed to be draining something essential from her, not just her youth, but her very life source. Sarah tried to remove it, but her fingers couldn't seem to grasp the fabric properly. Every time she thought she had hold of it, it would slip away from her grip like smoke. Sarah realized with growing terror that the scarf was no longer just a piece of clothing. It had become a spiritual leech, binding her to the old woman and allowing the curse to feed directly on her essence. That night, Sarah's dream was more vivid. She found herself in a vast library where all the books were made of fabric instead of paper. Each book contained the life story of someone who had helped the old woman over the century, and Sarah could see her own story being written in trays of blue wool. The old woman was there, sitting at a great loom, weaving Sarah's memory and experiences into a tapestry of suffering. With each pass of the shuttle, Sarah felt herself becoming less real, less solid, as if she was fading away like morning mist. "You understand now," the old woman said, without looking up from her work. "The scarf was never yours to give. It was a tool placed in your life precisely, so you will offer it to me when the time was right. Everything that has happened was meant to be." "That's not true," Sarah tried to argue, but her voice sounded thin and distant. "I chose to help you. It was my decision." The old woman finally looked up, and Sarah saw that her face was no longer old and withered. She looked exactly like Sarah, but with ancient knowing eyes. "Choice?" the old woman laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Child, I have been arranging the circumstances of your life since before you were born. Your grandmother's gift of that scarf, your decision to become a tailor, even your choice to work late that evening, all of it was orchestrated to bring you to me at the perfect moment." Sarah felt her sense of self slipping away like sand through her fingers. If everything had been predetermined, if she had never really had a choice, then perhaps she deserved this fate after all. But then she remembered Prophet Marian's warning. The curse will try to convince you that you deserve the punishment, that your suffering is payment for some forgotten sin. "No," Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. "Even if you arrange the circumstances, I still chose kindness over indifference. That choice was real, and it was mine. You may have manipulated the situation, but you couldn't control my heart." The old woman's expression shifted from smug satisfaction to concern. "It doesn't matter what you believe. The binding is complete. You cannot escape what you have chosen to accept." "We'll see about that," Sarah replied, and he willed herself to wake up. Sarah woke up before dawn. Her eyes were still blind and her skin was still aged, but her resolve was strong. She spent the day visiting old residents, asking about strange disappearances that happened 5 years ago. The stories were all the same. Every 5 years, someone helped an old woman in distress. Then their life fell apart. The woman appeared in different colored dresses, sometimes starving, sometimes injured, but the story never changed. From Mama Agba, the oldest woman in the village, Sarah learned the crucial truth. That woman sounds like Mama Amara, Mama Agba whispered. She was the most skilled midwife in the old kingdom, but she was greedy and proud. What did she do? The king's wife was having a difficult bet. The king's brother offered Mama Amara gold to let the queen and the baby die so he could inherit the throne. She took the gold and let them die when she could have saved them. Mama Agba shook her head sadly. The king caused her to live forever, but never find peace. She would wander eternally carrying guilt, unable to die until she found someone pure of heart to take her place. Why does she target people who help others? Because the cause can only pass to someone who gives freely without expecting reward. She seeks the very quality in others that she destroyed in herself, selfless compassion. As midnight approached, Sarah returned to the street corner with the ritual items. She also brought palm oil and matches for the final burning. The night was unusually quiet. No traffic sound, no barking dogs, no distant radio. Even the insects were silent. Sarah knelt and arranged the ritual items in a circle. She placed cowrie shell at the 4 directions, sprinkling protective herbs, and positioned carved bones exactly as Prophet Miriam had instructed. At the center, she placed her blue scarf and poured palm oil over it. I call upon the spirit of truth and justice, Sarah began. I reject the burden placed on me through deception. I return what was freely given, not in bitterness, but in the light of understanding. The air began to shimmer. Sarah felt an angry presence gathering in the darkness. You gave me permission, came the old woman's voice. You touched me willingly. By what right do you take it back? By the right of truth, Sarah replied. You manipulated my compassion. You presented yourself as helpless when you were powerful. You took my gift under false pretense. Sarah struck a match and held it over the oil-soaked scarf. If you light that fire, the voice came closer, you will burn away your capacity of kindness, your capability to trust. Is freedom worth becoming cold and selfish? Sarah hesitated. The old woman was partly right. This experience had changed her. She would never be the same trusting person. But then, Sarah realized this was part of the manipulation. The old one wanted her to believe that wisdom and caution were the same as coldness and selfishness. I will still be kind, Sarah said, but I'll be wise about my kindness. That's not selfishness. That's responsibility. The moment the flame touched the wool, everything changed. The fire erupted in a brilliant blue-white light that burned like a star. Sarah heard the old woman scream, not with voice, but with a sound from the earth itself. The sound made the air tremble. In her flame, Sarah saw visions of the old woman's past. She saw Mama Amara as she really was, beautiful, skilled but corrupted by greed. She saw the moments of the queen's death when greed chose gold over life. She saw the king's curse taking hold and centuries of hunting for compassionate souls. But Sarah also saw the faces of everyone who had helped Mama Amara over the century. Some went mad, some died, some vanished, but a few had managed to break free, just as she was doing now. The fire burned hotter and brighter. Sarah felt the spiritual bond dissolving. The scarf was consumed thread by thread, taking the cursed hold with it. As the last thread turned to ash, Sarah felt tremendous release. The invisible chains fell away. The pain in her eyes vanished instantly, and her vision returned. The aging reversed itself. Lines and wrinkles faded like melting frost. Most importantly, the heavy weight of despair was gone, replaced by deep peace and understanding. The blue-white fire died to normal flames, then embers, then nothing but ash, where her grandmother's scarf had been. From the distance, Sarah heard one final sound, not a scream, but a sigh that might have been relief. Perhaps Mama Amara had finally found peace, or perhaps she had moved on to search elsewhere. Sarah's dog Bingo appeared at the edge of the street, tail wagging as if he had been waiting for the danger to pass. Come on, boy, Sarah called softly. Let's go home. 3 months later, Sarah's life had settled into a new rhythm. Her tailor shop was busy again, though it took time to rebuild her reputation. She had a new sewing machine, Not as meaningful as her grandmother's, but functional. The clothes she made were still skillfully crafted, but Sarah approached her work differently. She was more selective about clients, more careful about the energy she put into each garment, more protective of her spiritual well-being. Sarah had learned to distinguish between healthy kindness and compulsive generosity that left her vulnerable. She still helped those in need, but with boundaries and wisdom. She volunteered at church, teaching girls to sew, and made clothes for families who couldn't afford them. But she no longer gave away precious things without careful thought. The most visible reminder was her relationship with scarves. Sarah never replaced her grandmother's scarf and couldn't bear wearing anything around her neck. Instead, she wore elaborate braids and head wrap that showed her creativity. One evening, Sarah saw a young woman giving expensive earrings to a beggar. Sarah approached her carefully. "I couldn't help but notice your kindness," Sarah said gently. The young woman's eyes shone. "My grandmother taught me to help those with less. These earrings were expensive, but what's jewelry compared to human suffering?" Sarah looked at the beggar, a man who seemed genuinely homeless and grateful. "Your grandmother was wise," Sarah said. "But let me share something I learned. True charity isn't just giving away what we have. It's giving in ways that help others without destroying ourselves. You could buy him a meal, direct him to the church for shelter, or offer work. Sometimes the most loving thing is helping people while preserving our ability to keep helping." The young woman looked confused. "If we don't sacrifice, how can our help be meaningful?" Sarah smiled sadly. True sacrifice is giving what you can afford to lose while keeping what you need to survive. When we give away things precious to our well-being, we often end up unable to help anyone. Sarah pulled out money she could comfortably spare and placed it in the cup alongside the earring. "See, we can both help him, and we both go home whole." The young woman considered this, then carefully retrieved her earring. "Thank you. I never thought about it that way." As years passed, Sarah built a successful business, married a kind man who understood her cautious nature, and raised children who learned early the difference between healthy giving and dangerous self-sacrifice. Sarah's story became a quiet legend in that village. Older women would warn their daughters to be generous but careful. The phrase, "kindness with wisdom," became common, though few knew its origin. When young people came to Sarah for advice, she always told them, "Be kind but be wise. Help others, but help yourself first. The world needs gifts, but only if you're strong enough to keep giving them." Sarah had learned the hardest lesson. Sometimes the most loving thing is to say no. Sometimes the greatest kindness is refusing to enable destructive pattern. And through charity begins with charity towards ourselves. She never forgot the old woman who taught her these lessons, and she never stopped being grateful, not for the cost, but for the strength she found in breaking free. Sarah discovered that the greatest magic was knowing what to keep and what to share, what to offer and what to protect. And it's very important that we choose wisdom over compulsion, boundaries over reckless generosity, and sustainability love over self-destructive charity. Thank you so much for watching, and please don't forget to share this story with your family and your friends whom I love to see them. Till I see you again in my next story. Goodbye.